Hello and welcome back to Planetos Podcast for episode 36. We continue the long march to the Winds of Winter by focusing on minor characters and houses. And we have a special one for you today, a minor character cloaked in espionage. I'm one of your hosts, Travis. You can find me on Twitter at Sir_Travis.
I'm another one of your hosts, Brett. You can find me at Homely Pillow on Twitter.
I'm another one of your hosts, Micah. You can find me on Twitter at Micah_of Clark.
So today we're going to discuss Lysono Maar, the spymaster of the Golden Company. In his duties, he is locked in a game of Cyvasse to help Prince Aegon Targaryen win the Iron Throne of Westeros. We're going to try today to unlock some of his plans, motivations, and maybe some secrets about him. I'm not sure about this theory. It's a bit tinfoil, but I'm really excited to talk to Brett and Micah about it and for the listeners out there to hear it. So what's going to be happening here at Planetos over the next 3 weeks, and of course this will be going on for weeks to come, but we have decided to each pick a minor character, and we'll talk a little bit about those minor characters, why we chose them. You'll hear from Micah next episode and his minor character, and then you'll hear from Brett and his minor character in a few weeks after Micah. But I am the one that chose Lysono Maar, and I guess I have to kind of defend why I chose him. I think he's just, first of all, his name is awesome. Like I just think Lysono Maar is just a pretty wicked cool name. But I love the spy games in Georgia series. I like the fact that this guy has such unique qualities physically. He really stands out amongst this sellsword company, this golden company, these hired swords that are invading Westeros. He's such a unique character. I think that contributes a little bit to why I like him, but also to some of the speculation that surrounds him. So why don't I just kind of open it up to you guys? Just some quick thoughts about Lysono Maar, and then as usual, we'll get into some of the background on the character, and then we'll do some discussing of this character.
Well, he's definitely not a character I paid any attention to on like my first few read throughs. So, but the more he's there, I'm seeing shades of Varys. So
yes,
and that's what really caught my attention. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, Lysono Maar didn't catch my attention until I read Arianne 2, specifically when Arianne 2 from the Winds of Winter, when she meets up with him and he has some exchanges with her, which we'll get into later. But a thing that always catches my eye with these minor characters is when George gives them a spotlight, so to speak. You get some time to get to know them, and they get some exchanges that reveals a little bit more about themselves. But yeah, he's really interesting, and like Brett said, a lot of shades of Varys in his spymaster abilities and in his background and appearance.
Definitely. He's someone that I don't even remember if he stood out to me the first time I read A Dance with Dragons. Like I don't even, I don't even know that I took note of him. Maybe not even the second time through, but what really brought me back to the character was a theory we're going to talk about a little bit, and then from there it kind of just rolled that I was like, okay, this guy's an interesting character, and I really want to see what he's up to, and I want to see if he is potentially a character we already know in the story, or is he in the service of a character that we've known since the beginning of this series. So I definitely think he warrants an episode, which is what we have today. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to again give some background on the character. I'm going to talk about what he's doing in these chapters that he's in. We'll talk a little bit again about potentially who he is, what his background is. And then I think we're going to close out the discussion with a little bit on um, the characters that were introduced um, that are members, that are leadership of the Golden Company, because I think there's some clues there, not only that point toward Lysono Maar, but point toward John Connington's alias Griff, but more importantly, Aegon the Sixth Targaryen's young Griff, and might reveal a little bit about the truth behind his parentage and lineage, etc. Lysono Maar appears or is mentioned in 3 chapters of A Song of Ice and Fire. The Lost Lord, which is chapter 24 in A Dance with Dragons. The Griffin Reborn, chapter 61 in A Dance with Dragons. And Arion 2, that's the sample chapter from The Winds of Winter. Now, according to the Ice and Fire wiki, Maar is a sellsword in service to the Golden Company. He is their spymaster, and he is new to John Connington. We know John Connington has been away from the Golden Company for about 12 years. That's a long time. When we first began looking into this, I almost kind of thought that John Connington had only been away from the Golden Company for a few months or a year or two, but he's been going for 12 years. So it's important to remember that Lysono Maar is new to John Connington. That's important when we get to some speculation at the end. Now, here is how Lysono Maar is described, and this comes from the chapter The Lost Lord. John Connington enters the captain's general tent of the Golden Company, and he surveys the assembled leadership around him. They're all gathered in homeless Harry Strickland's tent, and they are discussing what their next move is. They are camped outside of Volantis, and they are trying to decide whether they move on Slaver's Bay, either against or for Daenerys, or what their next move is. So it's interesting immediately what John Connington thinks about him. So here's what it says. He thinks in particular about Lysono Maar. The spymaster was new to Griff, a Lyseni named Lysono Maar, with lilac eyes and white gold hair and lips that would have been the envy of a whore. At first glance, Griff had almost taken him for a woman. His fingernails were painted purple and his earlobes dripped with pearls and amethysts. Ghosts and liars, Griff thought as he surveyed their faces. Revenants from forgotten wars, lost causes, failed rebellions, a brotherhood of the failed and the fallen, the disgraced and the disinherited. This is my army. This is our best hope. Now, from Ariane's perspective in the sample chapter in The Winds of Winter, Ariane Martell and her company are traveling from Dorne to Aegon's camp to treat with Aegon the Sixth and to find out if he's real. She's going under orders from her father, Prince Doran. And they are on the road from Mistfall to Griffin's Roost. Griffin's Roost, obviously, being John Connington's family's castle. Now, here's what the sample chapter says. Near dusk on the 4th day, not long after Chains and his wagons had taken their leave of them, Ariane's company was met by a column of sellswords down from Griffin's Roost, led by the most exotic creature that the princess had ever laid her eyes on, with painted fingernails and gemstones sparkling in his ears. Lysono Maar spoke the common tongue very well. I have the honor to be the eyes and ears of the Golden Company, Princess. You look, she hesitated. Like a woman? He laughed. That I am not. Like a Targaryen, Arianne insisted. His eyes were a pale lilac, his hair a waterfall of white and gold. All the same, something about him made her skin crawl. Was this what Viserys looked like? She found herself wondering. If so, perhaps it is a good thing that he is dead. I am flattered. The women of House Targaryen are said to be without peer in all the world. And the men of House Targaryen? Oh, even prettier. Though if truth be told, I have only seen the one. Mar took her hand in his own and kissed her lightly on the wrist. So we know that Lysono Maar has very Valyrian features. He looks like a Targaryen. Now, that's important for a number of reasons, but we have to understand that he is from Lys, or Lys, however you wish to pronounce it. And most of the individuals from there that are Lysini in heritage, they have Valyrian features. They have pale skin, they have white gold hair, they have purple, lilac, violet eyes. So, we just throw that out there that it is intriguing that he looks so much like a Targaryen for some reason, but it's also indicative of where he's from. Now, Lysono Maar is the spymaster, and we know from Varys's escapades through the main series what the spymaster does. But again, here is what we find out from John Connington. A lot of the information about what Daenerys is doing, what's happening in Slaver's Bay, because Lysono Maar is acting as a spy. Again, we're going back to the Lost Lord chapter. John Connington is sussing out what the Golden Company is doing and trying to keep as many of his own secrets hidden because he doesn't know if the leadership knows the true identity of young Griff. He's receiving news that young Kai is offering the Golden Company a rich contract to join them in opposing Daenerys and Meereen. And Griff informs them that there will be battle soon enough. Will we? Asks Lysono Maar. I assume you know that the Targaryen girl has not started for the West. Griff informs him that he heard that tale in Selhorys. No tale, simple truth. The why of it is harder to grasp. Sack Meereen? Aye, why not? I would have done the same in her place. The slaver cities reek of gold and conquest, requires coin. But why linger? Fear, madness, sloth? I think that's really interesting that Lysono Maar is trying to ascertain why Dany is staying in Slaver's Bay. Fear, madness, sloth. I want to come back to that in a little bit because I think that might be important in the discussion that we have on perhaps who he is or who he's working for. Now, Tristan Rivers interjects in this conversation and says that the Golden Company should go to Daenerys if she will not come to them. Can we walk across the waves, sir? Asked Lysono Maar. I tell you again, we cannot reach the Silver Queen by sea. I slipped into Volantis myself, posing as a trader, to learn how many ships might be available to us. The harbor teems with galleys, cogs, and carracks of every sort and size. Yet even so, I soon found myself consorting with smugglers and pirates. We have 10,000 men in the company, as I am sure Lord Connington remembers from his years of service with us. 500 knights, each with 3 horses, 500 squires with 1 mount apiece, and elephants. We must not forget the elephants. A pirate ship will not suffice. We would need a pirate fleet. And even if we found one, the word has come back from Slaver's Bay that Meereen has been closed off by blockade. Now, the Golden Company continues to debate how to reach Daenerys. March across the Demon Road, or even take the Yunkish contract and then break it beneath the walls of Meereen. Then Aegon VI, young Griff, as he's known, speaks up. and says that he is the only dragon the Golden Company needs. And he says that he will invade Westeros. Lysono Maar agrees with Griff that the Triarchs may help them sell west for the Seven Kingdoms, and he says something really interesting. The first Aegon took Westeros without eunuchs. Why shouldn't the sixth Aegon do the same? Lysono joins the Golden Company commanders in swearing allegiance to Aegon, and the boys plan to take the Iron Throne by invading Westeros. In The Griffin Reborn, we get just a minor mention of Lysono Maar. The Golden Company has taken Griffin's Roost, and they've taken a few minor castles, and it's suggested that they should wait for the rest of their strength to arrive and let Lysono Maar send his spies to learn more about their enemy. And then in the sample chapter, Arianne 2, Lysono Maar informs Arianne that Mistwood sent word of her coming, and of course he rides out to escort her, but that she has missed Lord Connington and the young prince. Arianne asks, "Off to war? Off to Storm's End?" Arianne wondered to herself. Just so, Lysono answers. It's in this moment that Arianne realizes that the Lyseni is a very different sort of man. He will let nothing slip, she realizes, after spending just a few hours in her company. Maar was glib, but he had perfected the art of talking a great deal whilst saying nothing. Arianne decides to confront Lysono to get more information out of him. She asks, "Is it true that you have elephants with you?" "A few," said Lysono Maar with a smile and a shrug. "And dragons?" "How many dragons do you have?" "One." "By which you mean the boy?" Arianne asks. "Prince Aegon is a man grown, princess. Can he fly? Breathe fire?" The Lyseni laughed, but his lilac eyes stayed cold. "Do you play Cyvasse, my lord?" asked Arianne. "My father has been teaching me. I am not very skilled, I must confess, but I do know that the dragon is stronger than the elephant." "The Golden Company was founded by a dragon," Lysono Maar responds. "Bitter Steel was half dragon and all bastard. I am no maester, but I know some history. You are still sellswords," Arianne responds. "If it pleases you, princess," Lysono Maar says, "all silken courtesy. We prefer to call ourselves a free brotherhood of exiles." Now, Arianne reminds him that while the Golden Company stands above the rest in the world of sellswords, they have been defeated every time they cross into Westeros. Maar remarks, amused, that at least the Golden Company is persistent. And some of those victories have been, or some of those defeats have been near victories. Arianne says that the Golden Company can flee back across the Narrow Sea, as John Connington did after Robert defeated him. But Dorne has no refuge. If they join Aegon's cause, the might of the Seven Kingdoms, the might of whoever wins the Iron Throne, will come down upon them. "Why should Dorne support an uncertain cause?" she asks. "Prince Aegon is of your own blood, princess, son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia of Dorne, your father's sister." Arianne retorts, "So is Dany, and she has dragons. Where is she?" Lysono Maar says on Slaver's Bay, and that while dragons are mightier than elephants in Cyvasse, give him real elephants he can touch and send against foes on a battlefield instead of dragons made of words and wishes. They reach Griffin's Roost. Lysono Maar introduces Arianne to the assembled Golden Company officers. Arianne is offered the chance to rest and change and spend the night before they depart the next morning by boat for Storm's End. Arianne is uneasy, feeling that Lysono Maar would not permit her and her company to return home to Dorne. She must go on to Storm's End to beard this dragon in its den. The chapter ends. So that's what we know about Lysono Maar. There's a lot of material there, even for just a very minor character. So let's start off by talking about who he could be. And I think definitely there is again, he's got these very Targaryen features. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit, and I'm going to ask you guys, do you think it's possible that he is a descendant of the Targaryens, or even the Blackfires, or even the Bright Flames?
Yeah, I mean that was the most interesting theory I've seen is he's possibly a bright flame. I mean he's got the Valyrian features. He looks like it. We kind of get the glimpses of Varys, and I think one of the theories I've seen. And I'm sorry, I don't know who posted. I just was researching and ran into it, but that he could be like a brother to Viserys or Varys, not Viserys, but
Just to interject here, if the listeners don't know who the Bright Flames are, those would be descendants of Aerion Targaryen, who it was known as Aerion the Monstrous or Aerion Bright Flame, as he liked to call himself. He was the second son of King Micah, the first Targaryen, and the older brother of Aegon the Fifth. So that's who Aerion is. We meet him in The Hedge Knight, and at some point he does something horrible, and he is exiled from Westeros, and so there's this gap where he's gone until he comes back. So people have speculated, throughout Fire and Blood, throughout the history of George's world, when Targaryens go east, they usually have some of them have children, some of them have relations that could spawn descendants. So that's where this theory comes from. Sorry,
Yeah.
Micah, I just wanted to throw that out there to explain to the listeners who the Bright Flames are.
Oh, that's fine. I don't have much to add that hasn't already. I don't have much to add that hasn't already been said. Yeah, he could totally be a Blackfire or a Bright Flame descendant. I could totally see that happening, especially if he's a pretender and with a league of pretenders.
Yeah. There's also another interesting theory that he could be a member of the Rogaire family. For those of you out there that aren't familiar with this family, it's a noble family from Lys. There's I can't remember his name, but there's some prominent Rogaires in Fire and Blood. One of them is like Master of Coin. They have a very powerful bank. I think one of them marries, is it Viserys? Aegon the Third's brother.
I think so.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now. I think
Yeah.
so. Correct us if we're wrong. Listeners.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah.
Where this theory comes from is the fact that there are two brothers in that time frame, in that time period of Fire and Blood, and their names are Lysandro and Lysero. And some people say, that sounds very much like Lysono. And George could, of course, just be putting that in there to say, well, I'm going to give them this breadcrumb, and maybe they'll go off this way and think that he's a Rogaire. The Rogaires marry into the Martells. There's a lot of connections between those two families. So some people say the last name Mar could be Martell, Mar. He's just adopted it into kind of a Lyseni name. It doesn't mean that Mar isn't a Lyseni last name, so we don't really know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think one of the interesting things is where he comes from, not physically, but he just seems to stand out so much as compared to these other folks in the Golden Company. So, like you said, Brett, he could be a younger brother of Varys or something. Or even if the theory that Aegon Targaryen is a son of Illyrio, perhaps he's a descendant of Illyria or a relative of Illyria. I mean, I think there's quite a possibility that he works for Viserys and Illyrio in some way.
Yes.
There's some connection there.
There's just it seems like he's got to be stemmed from somewhere. That like one of those options. I think I don't think he's like a nobody. So
yeah,
that kind of worked his way up.
And one of in the Griffin Reborn, when John Connington thinks to himself, or maybe it's Harry Strickland that thinks to himself, let's let Lysono Maar send his spies out to figure out what we can find. Like, what spy network does he have in Westeros? That's what I want to know. Like, now, coin will buy you a lot, so you could be sending small folk and other folks dressed in different attire to different castles and towns to just listen to what's going on. That would be how a lot of the espionage, a lot of the information is gathered in this time frame, in this time period that Westeros is set in. But I just, like, what spy network does he have? Like, what's the case? What does he know about Westeros? So that leads me to believe that, he does work for Varys, and Varys' spy network is his network, or he has learned the trade from Varys, and so he can quickly adapt to where he is.
And I mean, but that too could still be just as possible with the Martells, because I mean, it seems like they have some sort of spy network going on too, and they're involved with Varys. So who knows?
That's true. I mean, like all of these people, have spies or have folks in there. And when we say spy, let's not think of like a James Bond. This isn't necessarily just a Secret Service agent employed by, some government or. There are just random members of households. There are random nobles who are in the pocket of other nobles just to, share information. So spy can be anything. It can be a farmer. It could be a maid changing the linens. I mean, we see that happening in King's Landing. Varys has spies everywhere. Littlefinger has spies everywhere. So it could be just as easily as that he finds a bunch of people to send out to figure out what's going on. So there's a theory out there that Lysono Maar is Varys, that this is one of Varys's disguises, or this is the real visage of Varys. This is what Varys really looks like. Personally, I'll just say, I think it's hard for this to be one of Varys's disguises. I mean, he seems to be described not like he's fat or like bigger or whatever. I don't think Varys is described as like big and fat, but he's plump. He's not. Go ahead, Brett.
Oh yeah, no, I was. I think like the only way it works is if that's what Varys really looks like.
You can't. But you can add what appears to be weight to you. You can't remove weight.
Well, and that's kind of like, so I guess that theory is kind of saying like this is what he really looks like, and then his Varys disguise is just a disguise.
Is a disguise,
but it doesn't go along with the way, like, I guess you like the eunuchs, of that world. Like, well, I don't really know how any of that works, but in the books, they're described as like heavy set just because of I guess a hormone imbalance or something. That I don't know. I don't know nothing much about that, but it just doesn't go along with that. aspect of it, if that's true. So
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, the Unsolid are eunuchs, and they're pretty fit. Uh,
yeah.
so again, it just if you can't if Varys is the real Varys, if what we see in King's Landing is the real Varys, in my opinion, Lysono Maar can't be a disguise of him. Like, how does he look like that? And to be fair, the text doesn't lay out, he had a slender, trim body or whatever like that. But just the way he's described as almost looking woman-like, and kind of almost otherworldly in a way. The way Arianne just reacts to him seems like he's very spindly, he's very thin, he's very gaunt. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it'd be kind of hard too because Varys is bald. I mean, you can't. So that wouldn't be the real. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, but there's just a lot of questions there. Like, how did he get over the narrow sea and then back into King's Landing? Like, we know he could do it, but
right. That's one thing that we'll talk about. Maybe some evidence against the timing. Like, how can Varys be in one place and another? And George's story is told not necessarily out of order, but some chapters are happening over a day, some chapters are happening over a week or a month or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, he's a storyteller. He has to be able to move the characters where he wants them, but he's also grounded, that he has to make this somewhat believable. And so you're right. You can't have a character in one city and then 6,000 miles away on the other side of the world in the next one. It just doesn't work like that. So I just want to kind of check through some of the evidence that is used to say that Varys and Lysono are the same person. So the name Lysono is almost an anagram of son of Lys, and we know that Varys is from Lys as well. When the Shy Maid arrives in Voluntaris, and I said earlier that the Golden Company was in Volantis. They're actually in Voluntaris, which is just, I think, north of Volantis. It's not too far away, but it's north. It's a different city. It's north of Volantis. The Shy Maid, which is the boat that's carrying Griff and young Griff, it docks next to a gaily painted mummer's barge, and there's a short little section of the opening of the chapter where John Connington walks by the mummers and he notes that he notes seeing some of them and hearing what they're saying, etc. And of course we know that Varys is a mummer by trade. So and this is the chapter that John Connington meets Lysono Maar. So that could be one of George's way of just, again, planting this little crumb in there and seeing if people pick up on it. Lysono Maar speaks the common tongue very well. Now, someone who's a spymaster could easily, learn that trade, because that's something they need to know in order to advance their craft. One of the interesting things that perhaps points to, and this is really tinfoil, because names, George chooses names because they sound good to him, or he wants to use something that he's heard one time. But I think it's just really interesting that the name Mar, M-A-A-R, the name Mar could be used because George wants you to research it and understand there's a deeper meaning to it. So Mar in Spanish means sea. And of course, Varys has this, funny little retort. I think it's is it to Tyrion or Littlefinger? And basically he's saying that, the fish eat the other fish, et cetera, and he just keeps on paddling. So perhaps that's just a little nugget there to clue you into, why George chose this last name.
Yeah. I think that was to Tyrion.
Yeah. Now, the way George spells it, Maar, is actually a German word that means a crater created by a volcanic eruption. Okay? We know that several volcanic eruptions destroyed Valyria. And so perhaps that's another nod to not only if Varys is of Valyrian descent, like most people think he is, but it could be just noting that Lysono Maar is also of Valyrian descent, as we said, the people of Lysar. And then finally, John Connington almost mistakes Lysono Maar for a woman. And if you think about Varys, he's described as very effeminate. Of course, that could be a ruse. That's a way that he ingratiates himself to people, basically, forecasting to them that he's not a threat. That's how Varys acts in order to not really be seen as a threat. Although most people obviously think that Varys is a major threat. They just don't. This is a very masculine world. It's a very patriarchal world. It doesn't. You don't take serious someone who acts like that. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but most of those people just don't take someone serious like that. And so I think, and as we know, Varys's power is his mind, his ability to figure out strengths and weaknesses, etc. So it doesn't really matter how he acts. He's doing that as a charade, so people won't just take out their sword and cut him down.
Well, and it's funny because, when we get the epilogue of Dance of Dragons, I would have never thought he would be shooting people with crossbows, but
that's right. Yeah, so, I mean, you're right. You don't think about those things, and then he's murdered Pycelle and he's murdering Kevin.
Yeah, you just think he's a spy master, but apparently he's willing to pull some triggers.
Yep.
Surprise Varys incoming.
Man, I remember reading that chapter for the first time, and I was like, "What? Someone just shot Kevin?" And then he steps out of the shadows, and they're like, "Holy fuck."
Right." I'd seen the show before I read the book, so that was a major surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate that didn't make it to the show because that was such a
that would have been so good. Moment. Yeah.
So like I said earlier, Lysono Maar has an interesting line about eunuchs that he says the first Aegon didn't win Westeros with eunuchs. Now that could be a jab at Daenerys, the fact that she has a eunuch army in her employ. It could also be that they don't want folks to know that Varys is kind of behind the curtain, pulling the strings for Aegon. And so Lysono Maar is kind of the face of the spy network. This gets back to, is Lysono Maar in the employ of Varys? But I just think it's really interesting that if Lysono is either a disguise of Varys or is the real Varys, then he doesn't want people to associate a eunuch with Aegon. He wants to project strength. And I'm not saying eunuchs aren't strong, but in this world, eunuchs are obviously looked down upon.
I think it's interesting too. It could be a game Varys is playing to where he's no longer associated with this new king because he's employed, like, he can't go through three different changes. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to work. So,
no, you're exactly right. I mean, and that
or not changes, three different regimes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes, that's really good. I really like that because that could, I mean, if Aegon wins, I mean, Varys could be no more because he purposely either kills that character that he's created, or he leaves himself wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, all right, Varys is not going to be part of this regime because in case something happens, I want to be able to go to Danny, or I want to be able to go to someone else and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I tried to get you here, but you waited too long in Slaver's Bay. So, yeah, I think that's really good, Brett. I really like that.
Well, it kind of goes along with Lysono Maar being new to Griff. So, too. So.
Yeah. And I think that's an important fact. A lot of people hang this theory. Well, let me hold on that. I want to get to that here in just a minute. So we also know from the main series that Varys has employed a number of disguises throughout. He appears as a gruff jailer to Ned. He appears as an old woman to Tyrion. Arya, when she's down in the catacombs under King's Landing where the dragon skulls are, she thinks he's a soldier. So he's got makeup, wigs, perfumes, all of these things to allow him to freely move inside the Red Keep and throughout King's Landing. There's also a quote that I read earlier where Lysono Maar is basically lamenting that they would need a fleet to get to Westeros. And he says a pirate fleet. And there's a theory that Orain Waters is in service to Varys. He's working for Varys. And of course, he steals Cersei's 3 Drummonds and sets himself up as the pirate king of the Stepstones. So some people say, well, maybe that's a little clue that George has dropped in there as well. So before I get to the information that counters this, the counter information saying, oh no, this is really tinfoil. Micah, any thoughts on this theory?
I'm kind of against it with the information we have because of reasons we've spoken of before. Because, he would have to change so much to intersperse between King's Landing and then across the Narrow Sea over to wherever the Golden Company are at any period of time in between when John Connington gets there and whenever Lysono Maar joined the Golden Company. It's kind of sketchy to me in that regard. But it is a fun tinfoil theory. I'm not sure if it's as fun as Varys' merman theory, but
well, it's definitely not as fun as that. But
I mean, the theory that him and Lysono Maar are the same people. Yeah, I think it's unlikely, but I think it's more likely they're working together, or Lysono Maar is a puppet to Varys, or they're related, or just one of those two. But yeah.
So just to now I want to get into the counter evidence, because again, this theory is, people who support the theory really hang their hat on the fact that John Connington thinks to himself, the spymaster was new. New to John Connington. I think that's what the line says. The spymaster was new to John Connington. People say, well, okay, he's new. No. He's not new. John Connington has been going for 12 years. We do not know how long Lysono Maar has been the spymaster. All of the other commanders don't seem to have a problem with him. I mean, obviously they could have problems with him, but not on the page. They seem to trust his information. They trust his instincts. They're employing his spies, etc. So he's been around for some time in service to the Golden Company. There's actually another couple individuals that we'll talk about here in a minute that also are fairly new to John Connington, again, who's been going for 12 years. So you can't think of Lysono Maar as just all of a sudden popping into the Golden Company saying, "Hey, I'm your spymaster."
That's
not what's happening here.
Yeah, that's a good point, because he could have been around for 6 months to a year. That's still a pretty good chunk of time. I mean,
Right,
or
right.
longer. I mean, he could be around longer, but yeah, that the wording, new to him, and the 12-year is very
Exactly.
It's very good.
Exactly.
Very good at pointing that out.
Another thing that's important is, again, the timeline here. We see Varys kill Kevin Lannister and Maester Pycelle in the epilogue to A Dance with Dragons. And then Lysono Maar is presumably in Arianne 2, whenever that falls, or not presumably, he is with the Golden Company at Griffin's Roost. So, how long has he been there? Well, it seems like he lands with them. He's sending out his spies. He's operating there. So there's no evidence to suggest that he leaves them at any point. Now, I'm going to counter the counter evidence here, just a little bit. Two things. In the Lost Lord chapter, Lysono Maar says that he leaves himself and goes to Volantis to try and find a fleet and to try and figure out what's happening in Slaver's Bay. So we know he does his own work. So he does leave the Golden Company at some point. So it's quite possible that Lysono Maar leaves the Golden Company in Westeros and does some detective work. And it's far from Storm's End to King's Landing, but it's not King's Landing to Winterfell, right? We're not talking about thousands of miles. So presumably he could get to King's Landing at some point. Additionally, in the epilogue to A Dance with Dragons, Mace Tyrell is prominent in that chapter. He is, when the chapter opens, he's the hand of the king. He is there at the small council meeting. He is debating with Randall Tarley and Harris Swift and Kevin Lannister. And he says, he's talking about Marjorie's trial, and he wants to see Marjorie's trial ended, and then he will march on Storm's End. He will march south to take on the Golden Company. In Arianne 2's chapter, we know that John Connington and young Griff, presumably, have taken Storm's End. And we know that Mace Tyrell, an army of the Reach, is marching from King's Landing. So you could say, okay, well, actually, Arianne 2's chapter happens several weeks, several months later, even. So there is the possibility that the timeline would work for Lysono Maar being Varys, getting to King's Landing, killing Kevin and Pycelle, and then getting back to them. But it's I think it's still a bit of a leap, and so I think I come down to Lysono Maar being in the employ of Varys, whether he's related to Varys or this is another orphan that, maybe he was a bird, a little bird at one time that Varys raised up, a descendant of Illyrio or, something like that. I think that he's in the employ of Varys. And, Varys, again, like to your point, Brett, Varys can't just leave King's Landing and go to the Golden Company and say, okay, well, I'm back and, here's what I found out. Here's my information. I'm your spymaster also. This is Varys's eyes and ears. Lysono Maar is not the eyes and ears of the Golden Company. He's the eyes and ears of Lord Varys in the Golden Company. I think that's where I come down on this. One other interesting thing that I think quite possibly is, George has these archetypes that he uses, and he will explore. He has so many characters and so many secondary and minor characters throughout the narrative that he uses to really parallel some of the main characters. So a perfect example is Pretty Maris. Pretty Maris in another life is Brienne. She's the Brienne that leaves Westeros and becomes a sellsword. So quite possibly a Lysono Maar could be Varys in another life. Could be a Varys prototype that operates in Essos. So, I think there's just so many possibilities that Lysono Maar could actually be. I think at the end of the day, he is Lysono Maar. He is a minor character himself, and he'll have a part to play. I don't know what that will be, but he'll have a part to play in Aegon taking the Iron Throne. So let's close out our discussion on Lysono Maar by saying, what do you think happens to him? Is he just going to be this character that is just there in the employ of young Griff of Aegon the Sixth and Golden Company? What happens to him? Micah, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I definitely think he's going to play a small role going forward as his own character. We could see him doing things like getting information on who's in King's Landing. Laswell Peak probably spilled the beans to him as to who the Friends in the Reach are, so he probably knows that Randall Tarley and Mathis Rowan are going to turn. I'll probably see him around in the background, just giving information away to John Connington and Haldon and Aegon. Not much more I see happening. Otherwise, he could go out against Daenerys or in the King's Landing fire.
I think it'd be interesting if he just kind of slipped away if Daenerys comes back to take her throne. He kind of just disappears from the narrative after her attack, if that all comes true. But yeah, I mean, I think he's either gonna. I think Danny's either gonna roast him or he's gonna slip away.
I really like that. I have this mental image of a chapter in, I would say, A Dream of Spring. I don't think this is going to happen in Wind's Winter, but a John Connington chapter of him in King's Landing when Daenerys is attacking, everything is collapsing around them. Varys is, just like broken. The world that the perfect prince that he constructed is dead. The city is collapsing around them because the real Targaryen with real dragons is here, and she's pissed off that you stole her fucking throne and you betrayed her, and shit's going to. And I love that little detail that, just imagine like a line of like, even Lysono Maar abandoned us, and like,
yeah,
he's on a boat selling back. I kind of like
Marianne.
Yeah, I really kind of like that.
I
like that.
I
too.
just don't see Lysono Maar dying for anyone but himself. So, like, I, I feel like he's that kind. I mean, Varys is that kind of person, and you kind of see, he's kind of he slips away whenever he wants. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if any spy master is going to go out with Aegon, it's going to be Varys.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really like that, Brett. I like that idea that they can't find him, and they're like, "Fuck, he's just abandoned us. He's just gone. He's like, nope. I'm not. I'm not sticking around to get nuked by the person we should have actually backed."
Yes.
He's that SpongeBob meme going, "I'm gonna head out."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. He's paddling, right? He's paddling like Varys. He's just paddling.
He too is a mermaid.
Yes. Oh man. Okay, yeah, I love that. So we want to wrap up the episode with the discussion on some of the other characters that we get introduced to in the Lost Lord and the Griffin Reborn, and that's the leadership and some of the members of the Golden Company. And Mike is going to talk us through some of this, but I just wanted to just note a couple things here. One of the brilliant things that George does in these two chapters is not only introducing this leadership of the Golden Company, a sellsword company that we've heard so much about in the main series, but then we finally get to see in person in A Dance with Dragons, and who's going to have a lot to do in the Winds of Winter. But George also lays the groundwork for these individuals being descendants of Westerosi nobility. And they are descendants with claims to lands and castles in the Seven Kingdoms. Or, and this is important, or perhaps they're not. So here's what John Connington thinks to himself. Some of the sellswords bore bastard names. Others claimed names that had once been large in the histories of the Seven Kingdoms. Not all were genuine, he knew. In the free companies, a man could call himself whatever he chose. So George is introducing a bit of skepticism in these chapters about these individuals. And that should really highlight for the reader that all within the Golden Company may not be as it appears. So we want to spend just a few minutes here going through the individuals in the Golden Company that are introduced, and we'll talk a little bit about the names they have, the regions of the Seven Kingdoms they're from, and the potential castles or families that they could really come to affect if, we say if, but when, I think likely, Aegon takes the Iron Throne. So, Micah, kick us off.
All right. So the first one on our list here is Franklin Flowers, who has a Reach bastard name, and he claims that his mother was a washerwoman at Cider Hall, and that his father is one of the Brown Fossaways. So one of the interesting things is that one of the Brown Fossaways is in Mace Tyrell's army, that being Tanton Fossaway. So I think that one of the proofs that we can get that Franklin Flowers is legit, one of the things being that Franklin Flowers talks a lot about House Fossaway. If we get like a small line or something during the Battle of Storm's End or after, wherein Franklin Flowers kills Tanton Fossaway, I think that'll prove that Franklin Flowers is probably real, if he's specifically the one to take out Tanton Fossaway. And then we also have Mark Mandrake, who is noted as having a hole in his cheek where Slaver's Mark had once been burned away, and he wears a chain of golden skulls. Mark Mandrake, or Mandrake specifically, is a Westerosi name that was exiled, and we don't know where it's from. But given that he was a slave, he's probably chosen that name for himself, which is a pretty cool name.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet name.
Yep.
And then we have Black Balak, who is a Summer Islander and the commander of the Archers. He's probably going to give Mace Tyrell a run for his money, given that the Reachmen look down on archers. Knights in general look down on archers. But
yeah, and it's important to note that it's the archers that really win the taking of Griffin's Roost. That chapter starts, the Griffin Reborn starts with, he sent the archers in first, and it talks about John Connington saying, he never liked archers. He never trusted them. He thought that it was really beneath a way to fight. But with years on him and serving in exile, he's come to understand how important they are. And this really gets to our friend Brenda Beefish's theory of Westerosi Agincourt, that there's quite a bit of possibility that just like the English archers and smaller army was able to defeat French cavalry in the 1400s, that it's quite possible the Golden Company, a smaller force, will be able to defeat a larger Reach army under the command of Mace Tyrell because of archers, because of the superior firepower.
Yeah. I think Black Block is probably legit, given that he looks like a Summer Islander and he's got more Summer Islanders with him that are pretty cool with him, it seems. So he's probably legit. And then we have Goris Idorian, who's a Volantine paymaster. He probably is. And he also seems to be a bit antagonistic towards Daenerys, which most Volantine are at this point. So probably. And then we get homeless Harry Strickland, everyone's favorite. The Captain General and his family supported the Blackfires in the First Rebellion, and he also has some issues with his feet, which are blistered.
That's an understatement. It's an understatement, since that's all he fucking talks about.
Yeah.
Feet when he first introduced.
Once or twice, He could be legit, since his family supported the Blackfires at first. They could have joined up with the Golden Company, and I don't know, maybe it's kind of up in the air. He doesn't really talk about his family as much as his feet.
Yeah.
And then we have Laswell Peak. Peak being, of course, a very traitorous family. So with such names as Unwin the Loser Peak. Laswell is probably for real, given that he is the one who points out that they have friends in the Reach.
Yeah.
Which, of course, could just be known in the higher circle of the Golden Company. But given that George has him specifically say it, I lean towards him being the real thing. In which case, he's most likely related to Lord Titus Peak, who is the Lord of Starpike. And then we also have Tristan Rivers, who we have absolutely no information about, except that Rivers is a Riverlands bastard name. So it's up in the air for him. He has dialogue, but nothing that we can pull from to prove one way or the other if he's the real thing. And then we have Lyman Pease, possibly from House Peasebury or from another branch.
Yeah, I added that note there, and we talked a little bit about that before we recorded that, Lyman Pease, I mean, that's definitely a Westerosi name, but there's no information on a House Pease. There's no information on who this guy could be. So,
yeah.
Is it a branch of House Peasebury? Did he just come up with it himself? Is this just a family we haven't heard about yet? I just think it's interesting.
What if he got the name wrong? Like he was trying to name himself like House Peasebury, but he's not actually from there, so he's just like, oh, it's the Pease family, and like, yeah, that's where I come from.
And someone's like, the vegetable?
Yeah, the peas. Yeah.
In addition to those, we have two Strongs, two more Peaks, Muds, a Lothston, a couple of Coles, and some more bastards called Hill and Stone, varying in bastard names and ancient and extinct house names, such as we get Young John Mudd. And of course, the Mudds are ancient kings of the Riverlands.
Right.
And given John Mudd's appearance and how far back the kings were, that's unlikely.
Yeah.
It's pretty unlikely that he's legit. So we can reasonably assume there are other claimants in the Golden Company for the lands in the North, Dorne, Iron Islands, Crownlands, or wherever, Jadesea.
Yeah. What I really like about this is just a few things. One, these people, I agree with you on. I really like Franklin Flowers. I think he's an interesting character. I think that he has very specific information on where he came from, and like you said, there's a character in Mace Tyrell's army that we could, like you said, we could find out that he kills in battle, and now he claims whatever lands they have. Laswell Peak, same thing. But what the way John Connington describes it, the way George writes it, is others claim names that had once loomed large in the histories of the Seven Kingdoms. I mean, I think some of these people read the history books or hear the stories around the campfires like, hey, I want to be called John Mudd. I think that's a pretty cool name. And so I'm going to do that. And then when we finally go back, and I think this is an important point here, is the Golden Company has invaded a few times with, during the Blackfires, and each time they're defeated. So they have always planned to invade and conquer Westeros, and they just never do it. And so you can see a young guy playing dice around a campfire, drinking, whoring, all of these things, and be like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take that castle. That castle belongs to me. But it's just a story that he heard once, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm a descendant of Torrhen Stark. I'm a descendant of whoever. I love that George puts that much thought into these stories. But another thing that occurs to me is, and I think the three of us believe, and most of the fandom believes, that Aegon is going to be successful. He's probably going to win, and he's probably going to take the Iron Throne. Now, how long that lasts, I think it's up for debate. That probably won't last that long. But with so many of these folks in his camp who have claims to these castles and these lands, he's potentially looking at a pretty delicate political situation. Especially if he has lords and regions in Westeros that are flocking to him and saying, well, now, wait a minute, hold on. We want to be on the winning side, but we're not giving up our castle for, some guy that says he's the Mudd, descended back thousands of years. He's not going to be Lord Paramount of the Riverland. So, I don't think we're going to get a lot of time to hash that out, but I just think that that's an interesting aspect that, with all of these people who want something, I mean, and that's what sellswords, that's what they want. They want the spoils of war. And what are the spoils of war in Westeros but castles and land and, noble blood?
That is interesting. I never even thought about, just that problem in general. Like, is he gonna have to, kind of betray some of these people in the Golden Company, and that could be part of his undoing, or screw over some of these Westerosi lords that he doesn't really need to. But yeah, that's interesting though.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like if the word gets out to the public that Aegon is probably a fake Targaryen, which I don't know if it'll get out to the public or not. I think a couple of characters might find that out, if it's even real. Some people might even question, well, are these other people who came in here with elephants even real? Is Lysono Maar legit? Is Franklin Flowers actually a bastard? Is the guy who complains about his feet all the time actually a Strickland?
Right.
Yeah, and I think some of these people, they're going to be able to prove it, but I think for the majority, I don't see it. I don't see it happening.
Besides John Connington, does it say do any of these other people fight in Robert's Rebellion?
I don't think it ever says.
Yeah.
I don't think it says. No.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things from the context. Think about this from John Connington's viewpoint. That, what makes the most dramatic sense is that Aegon really isn't Rhaegar's son, because John has put so much importance on seating his best friend, as he thinks. I don't think Rhaegar was his best friend, but seating his best friend and the person that he had a lot of affection for, seating that person's son on the Iron Throne. He failed Aerys. He wasn't able to go far enough to win against Robert, and so he failed Rhaegar as well. So he's got to do everything he can to make sure Aegon wins. Then you're surrounded by all of these other people who may or may not be real. I just think there's just such tragedy written in there for John Connington, that you hitched your wagon to a bunch of fake people, a bunch of people who really don't. I mean, again, Brett, you're right. Some of them do. You're right too, Micah. Like, some of them have probably their claims are legitimate, but we're talking some of these people thousands of years, hundreds of years, even. I mean, it's just not going to work out for them like they think.
I don't even think it may not even work out for the people that actually have legit claims, because those families have moved on too. Like,
you could see Franklin Flowers go up in a Field of Fire 2.0.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But
that's the other thing. A lot of people are just gonna go boom. I mean,
one of the something I just kind of thought about, but like, I don't know if anybody else went with John Con after Robert's Rebellion, because Aerys did that to him, and Robert kind of pardoned everybody. So I think John Connington was probably one of the last to get screwed over when it came to that. So, but I mean, who knows? It doesn't really say, but
no, yeah. I mean, it would be a lot different if some of these people had served under Connington and left with him, or something like that. But
I don't think any of them did.
So many of them have their families left before he did. So yeah, I just think that's an interesting bit of storytelling that George puts in here, which I think really, to us, the reader, it really stands out that, man, these people are fake. Aegon's fake, and John Connington just doesn't see it. And maybe he does, because some people speculate that he kind of knows something is up here, but he's just so committed to getting home and to making things right that he just doesn't care at this point. I mean, and especially since he's suffering from grayscale, like, what does he have to lose?
Yeah.
At this point, like, he is going out on a bang. Like, he's going to do some terrible things to get Aegon the throne, and then everything's going to collapse around him. Any final thoughts on the Golden Company, Lysono Maar?
No, I think we're good.
That's about it for me, in accordance with them.
Okay. So first, before we close out, we just want to give a big thank you to our friends, Brenda Beefish and Poor Quentin at Nauticast, who said some really nice things about us in, I don't think it was their last episode, but a couple episodes ago. They gave us a shout out right at the beginning. We really appreciate them We thank them for their support. We thank them for listening. We thank them for all of the things they've taught us, because they really are giants in this fandom. And if you're not listening to Not a Cast, go listen to them, because I mean, just the work they're doing is just amazing. But we appreciate their kind words and support, and their friendship. And that's what's most important, is that everyone in this fandom are friends with each other, and it's just, we just have a lot of fun, and so thank them for that. So that does it for Lysono Maar. Really interesting character, really minor character. I think we've kind of determined that we think he is who he says he is, although he probably has a master who is not the Golden Company. Perhaps it's Varys, perhaps it's Illyrio, perhaps it's both of them. So we look forward to seeing what happens to him and the Golden Company in the Winds of Winter. So thank you all so much for joining us yet again for another episode. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and we hope that you will rate and review us on iTunes and other podcasting platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Planpost Podcast. Like our Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. And we'll be back very soon with a brand new episode. So until then, see you around Planetos. Good night.
See ya.